There is a silent pain that many people carry, a pain that almost no one can see from the outside. It is the pain of trying to save someone who, in practice, continues to hurt you. It is an emotionally exhausting cycle. You give of yourself, invest time, energy, and feelings, believing you can help, change, or transform this person, even when they, consciously or not, cause suffering. This experience is not just about the other person but also about how you internalize the situation, how your body and mind react to something that seems impossible to control. Often, those trapped in this cycle feel a kind of invisible guilt, guilt for caring too much, guilt for feeling anger or frustration, guilt for not being able to fix the other person. The problem is that when trying to save someone who hurts you, the individual creates an illusion of control. The hope that the other will change acts as a fuel that keeps the person trapped, even when the relationship becomes toxic or emotionally harmful. Every act of care that is not reciprocated, every ignored word or harmful action, transforms into a silent weight that accumulates over time. Interestingly, the one who tries to save often ends up, unintentionally, a victim of their own generosity and their desire to see the other well. It's as if the act of loving merges with suffering, and the line between empathy and self-sacrifice becomes increasingly thin. Another important aspect of this invisible pain is that it is rarely understood by others. Friends, family, or even professionals may only see the surface. Why do you stay with someone who hurts you? But this question, however logical it may seem, ignores the emotional complexity involved. Those in the cycle know that there is hope, memories of good moments, or deep feelings that cannot simply be turned off with rational thinking. Recognizing that you are in this cycle is the first step to beginning to understand the depth of the pain and, eventually, finding ways to protect yourself without losing the ability to feel and love. This initial phase is crucial. It is the moment when you need to look at yourself honestly, without judgment. Asking yourself, why do I keep trying to save someone who hurts me, is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of emotional courage. It is the moment to start recognizing patterns, emotions, and reactions that until now were invisible or ignored. This is an essential step for you to eventually balance love and self-care without losing yourself in the process of trying to fix the other person. When we try to save someone who hurts us, we enter an emotional cycle that can be as exhausting as it is invisible. This cycle functions like an internal roller coaster, alternating between moments of hope and deep frustration. Hope arises in small gestures, a kind word, an apology, an unexpected smile. It is in these moments that the heart believes everything will improve, that the person can truly change, and that the effort is worthwhile. The mind, however, keeps the scars of past disappointments, creating a silent conflict between what we wish would happen and what actually occurs. Each positive gesture is quickly followed by an action that hurts, creating constant tension that wears one down emotionally. This cycle of hope and frustration is so powerful that many end up becoming prisoners of a repetitive pattern. They hope the other will improve, but each new disappointment reinforces feelings of inadequacy and guilt. Painful questions arise. Did I not do enough? Could I have acted differently? Am I responsible for this pain? These thoughts consume mental and emotional energy, making each attempt to help more difficult than the previous one. The paradox is cruel. The desire to see the other well is genuine and noble, but the impact on the person giving is devastating. At the same time, the person causing the pain often does not fully perceive the emotional weight they impose, often unintentionally. Moreover, this cycle is reinforced by emotional memory. Good moments, memories of affection and care, create a kind of emotional anchor that keeps the person connected to the other, even when reality clearly demonstrates that the relationship is harmful. It is as if the mind says, look at what has already happened for the better, maybe it can happen again, while the heart suffers from the current reality. This dissonance between memory and present experience generates silent exhaustion, making it difficult to recognize when it is time to step away. The person believes they are fighting for love, but often they are fighting against their own emotional fatigue. Recognizing this cycle is essential to breaking it. It is not about abandoning empathy or caring for the other, but understanding the limits of what is healthy. When you realize that each attempt to save someone ends in frustration, it is a signal to look inward, to your own needs, and perhaps seek external support, whether through friends, family, or professionals. Awareness of this pattern allows you to start protecting yourself without losing the ability to love, and this protection is a form of self-care as important as any gesture of care toward another. One of the most silent effects of trying to save someone who hurts you is the profound impact on self-esteem and self-perception. When we give ourselves completely to help someone who causes us pain, our own image is placed in the background. Every rejection, every gesture of devaluation, or every harsh word received is internalized as if it were a direct reflection of our personal worth. It is common for people in this cycle to constantly question themselves: am I not good enough? Do I deserve to be treated this way? What is wrong with me that I can't make the person change? These thoughts gradually and almost imperceptibly erode self-esteem, leaving the person more vulnerable and prone to repeating the pattern. At the same time, the individual's identity becomes intertwined with the role of a savior or caregiver for the other person. They begin to measure their value by how much suffering they can endure on someone else's behalf or by how much they can give of themselves, even when there is no reciprocity. This phenomenon creates a dangerous imbalance. The person believes that loving is synonymous with suffering and that their own happiness must come second. In extreme situations, this can lead to depression, anxiety, and deep feelings of inadequacy. What is even more cruel is that the more the person strives to help, the more they inadvertently reinforce the other person's behavior, keeping the cycle of pain active and making emotional recovery even harder. Another aspect worth noting is how this dynamic affects external relationships. Often, friends and family notice emotional exhaustion but do not fully understand the internal dilemma. The person may feel isolated, unable to express their pain without seeming weak or unfair toward the one causing harm. This isolation intensifies the invisible suffering, as, in addition to dealing with the pain caused by the other, there is the feeling of carrying it alone. Recognizing the influence of this cycle on self-esteem and identity is fundamental to beginning the recovery process. It is necessary to start separating what belongs to you and what belongs to the other, understanding that your capacity to love should not become synonymous with self-destruction. Finally, it is important to emphasize that the first step in restoring self-esteem and identity is awareness. Identifying that the cycle of trying to save someone who hurts you is affecting who you are, your values, and your self-perception is essential to create strategies for emotional protection. This includes establishing clear boundaries, seeking external support, and learning to prioritize your own needs without guilt. When a person understands that their value does not depend on the suffering they endure or the effort they dedicate to someone who hurts them, they begin to rebuild a healthy relationship with themselves, becoming stronger and better prepared to establish bonds based on mutual respect and reciprocity. One of the most complex traps when trying to save someone who hurts you is the confusion between genuine love and emotional dependence. Many people interpret their need to care for the other as a demonstration of love when, in reality, it may be a sign that they are trapped in a pattern of dependence. Emotional dependence arises when a person's happiness and well-being come to rely almost exclusively on the behavior and approval of the other. In this context, the act of trying to save someone who hurts becomes less an act of affection and more a compulsive necessity, fueling feelings of anxiety, frustration, and a constant fear of losing the person. The emotional cycle created by this dependence is extremely exhausting. Each small improvement in the other person's behavior reinforces hope, but each disappointment generates intense pain, anger, and frustration. It is common for the person to blame themselves for not being able to help, forgetting that it is not their responsibility to change the other. The illusion of control and the expectation of transformation become central, leading to profound internal questions. If I really try hard, will he or she change? Is my love enough to make everything better? These questions, while understandable, create constant emotional pressure, wearing down self-esteem and mental health. Another factor complicating this dynamic is the idealization of the relationship. Many people tend to focus on positive memories or moments when everything seemed perfect, ignoring the recurring patterns of pain and repetition. This idealization keeps the emotional bond alive even in the face of harmful behaviors. The mind creates justifications. He was going through a hard time, she didn't mean to hurt me, or, if I love enough, everything will improve. This rationalization mechanism reinforces emotional dependence, making the person increasingly vulnerable and hindering decision-making that prioritizes their well-being. Recognizing the difference between genuine love and emotional dependence is essential to breaking the cycle of suffering. True love involves care, respect, and reciprocity. Emotional dependence is characterized by fear, anxiety, and a constant need for validation. When a person begins to realize that their relationship with someone who hurts them is based more on the need to save and control than on balanced love, it is possible to start a process of reflection and emotional self-protection. This process requires courage, self-observation, and often external help, but it is essential for creating healthier relationships and preserving one's own emotional health. Finally, it is important to remember that recognizing emotional dependence does not mean abandoning empathy or compassion for the other. It simply means establishing clear boundaries, protecting oneself, and understanding that a true demonstration of love also involves respecting oneself. The challenge lies in balancing care and protection, acknowledging that loving someone does not mean losing oneself in the process or accepting constant pain as part of the bond. The first step is awareness. Understanding that emotional dependence is a silent prison, and breaking free from it is an act of self-love, courage, and emotional maturity. One of the heaviest aspects of trying to save someone who hurts us is the constant feeling of guilt. Those who live in this cycle often mistakenly believe they are responsible for the other person's emotional well-being. Every act of anger, harsh word, or hurtful behavior is internalized as if it were a personal failure. The mind creates an endless loop of justifications and self-criticism. If I had done things differently, they wouldn't have reacted this way. If I were more patient, everything would be fine. If I didn't care so much, I wouldn't be suffering like this now. This weight of emotional responsibility is overwhelming, because it not only drains mental and emotional energy but also reinforces the self-sacrificial cycle that keeps the person trapped in pain. Moreover, guilt often mixes with the desire to control the situation. Those who try to save feel that if they do everything right, they can prevent conflicts or reduce the other person's suffering. The illusion of control arises precisely because they believe personal effort can transform another's emotional reality. However, this belief is misleading and exhausting, as no one can forcibly change another person. Each failed attempt increases the sense of failure, undermining self-esteem and reinforcing the idea that loving is synonymous with ongoing pain. The impact of this dynamic extends to all areas of life. The person begins to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and emotionally exhausted. Even everyday activities, such as working or socializing, can be affected by the weight of the responsibility assumed. The mind remains focused on the other, trying to anticipate problems or avoid conflicts, consuming energy that should be dedicated to self-care. It is a silent, almost invisible exhaustion, yet deeply impactful, contributing to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. Recognizing that you are not responsible for the other person's emotions is an essential step toward breaking free from this cycle. It is necessary to understand that each individual is responsible for their own choices, reactions, and emotional well-being. Empathy is important, but self-sacrifice is not love, it is depletion. Establishing clear and healthy boundaries is an act of courage and self-respect. When you understand that you are not to blame for the behavior of someone who hurts you, you begin to create space to protect yourself emotionally without giving up on caring for yourself or maintaining healthy, balanced relationships. Finally, it is crucial to internalize that taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being does not mean becoming insensitive or selfish. It means learning to differentiate between what is under your control and what belongs exclusively to the other. It is a gradual process, requiring patience, reflection, and external support, but it allows you to rebuild a relationship with yourself based on respect, self-care, and self-love. Freeing yourself from the weight of guilt is a decisive step to breaking patterns of suffering and creating truly healthy and reciprocal bonds. Empathy is a fundamental quality in human life and relationships, but when misdirected, it can become an emotional trap. Trying to save someone who hurts us often arises from a genuine feeling of empathy. We feel the other person's pain, want to alleviate their suffering, and believe we can help them overcome their challenges. However, when this empathy turns into excessive responsibility, constant self-sacrifice, and absorption of another's pain, it ceases to be healthy. The line between compassion and self-destruction becomes thin, and many confuse love with the obligation to endure suffering that is not theirs. One of the central problems is that empathy does not guarantee reciprocity. You may deeply feel the other person's suffering, but that does not mean they will change their behavior or acknowledge your effort. In the cycle of trying to save someone who hurts, empathy often fuels the illusory hope that everything can improve, even when signs of harmful repetitive patterns are clear. This constant hope keeps the person trapped in the emotional cycle, turning each act of care into a silent test of patience and emotional endurance. Mental and emotional exhaustion arises not only from the other's suffering but also from the continuous attempt to reconcile it with one's own expectations of change and improvement. Furthermore, excessive empathy can lead to neglecting personal needs. Those who worry excessively about the other often place their own emotional health second, suppressing feelings of frustration, sadness, or anger to avoid conflict or hurting the person they love. Over time, this suppression accumulates, manifesting as anxiety, irritability, emotional fatigue, and even physical symptoms. The cruel paradox is that while empathy seeks to bring people closer and strengthen bonds, it can also distance a person from themselves, making it difficult to recognize their own limits and desires. Recognizing the limits of empathy is essential for emotional self-protection. Being empathetic does not mean carrying another's pain as if it were your own, nor does it mean accepting harmful behaviors under the guise of love. Establishing clear boundaries, knowing when to step back, and prioritizing self-care are acts of courage and emotional maturity. By learning to balance empathy and protection, a person can continue to care for others without losing themselves in the process, preventing acts of love from turning into constant suffering. Conscious empathy, one that recognizes limits, strengthens relationships healthily, allowing care to be genuine, reciprocal, and non-destructive. Finally, it is important to understand that loving consciously implies respecting your own feelings and recognizing that it is not always possible to change the other person. Balanced empathy allows you to offer support, affection, and understanding without sacrificing your own emotional health. This distinction is crucial. Empathy without limits becomes a prison, empathy with awareness is freedom. Learning this difference is an essential step to breaking cycles of pain and building healthy relationships, where care is not synonymous with suffering, but with genuine connection, respect, and reciprocity. When we are trapped in the cycle of trying to save someone who hurts us, self-care is often neglected. Attention is entirely focused on the other person, and personal needs are set aside. Sleeping little, feeling constant anxiety, ignoring one's own emotions, and suppressing boundaries become common behaviors. Over time, this neglect leads to physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, making the person more vulnerable and, paradoxically, less capable of supporting the one they love. Self-care, therefore, is not a luxury or selfishness. It is a vital necessity for maintaining balance and emotional health. Self-care means recognizing that you matter too. It means setting clear boundaries and respecting them, learning to say no without guilt, and prioritizing moments that promote physical and emotional well-being. When someone tries to save the person who hurts them, they often feel that stepping back or imposing limits is betrayal or a moral failure. In reality, caring for yourself is an act of courage and self-love. Without it, the person risks losing themselves entirely in the other, forgetting who they truly are, their values, and their needs. Self-care is, therefore, a tool for liberation. It protects against emotional exhaustion and allows one to see the relationship clearly, without illusions or unnecessary self-sacrifice. Another essential point is that self-care strengthens self-esteem. By dedicating time to your own needs, you send yourself the message that you are worthy of care, respect, and love, regardless of the other person's behavior. This creates a solid foundation for establishing healthy relationships, where love is not measured by the suffering endured or the efforts to save someone, but by balance, respect, and reciprocity. A person who practices self-care learns to recognize signs of toxic relationships more quickly and develops tools to act with clarity and emotional protection. Moreover, self-care does not need to be grand or complex. It can consist of small daily gestures, such as dedicating time to hobbies, meditating, walking, reflecting on emotions, or simply resting without guilt. Each action directed toward personal well-being reinforces the idea that you have value, that your emotional health matters, and that you do not need to carry alone the burden of trying to save someone unwilling to change. It is a silent yet powerful step toward breaking patterns of suffering and regaining emotional autonomy. Finally, understanding that self-care is synonymous with self-love allows you to redefine the way you relate to others. It is not about abandoning empathy or compassion, but about creating a balance where loving does not mean self-destruction. When a person practices genuine self-care, they can offer love consciously, healthily, and sustainably. In this way, the invisible cycle of pain begins to lose strength, and the possibility of more balanced relationships emerges, where care, respect, and reciprocity become the foundation of emotional connection. There comes a time when it is necessary to confront reality. Trying to save someone who hurts you does not mean you are failing at love, but that you are trapped in harmful emotional patterns. Recognizing this is the first step toward emotional liberation. Many people spend years believing that their extreme dedication can change the other person or save the relationship, ignoring clear signs of recurring harmful behaviors. The truth is that no one can change another person. Each individual is responsible for their own choices, behaviors, and emotions. Accepting this is both liberating and painful. The process of liberation requires courage to identify toxic patterns and act consciously. This includes recognizing when love has become self-sacrifice, when care has turned into constant emotional exhaustion, and when personal boundaries have been repeatedly crossed. Breaking these patterns does not mean abandoning empathy or compassion. It means reclaiming one's own dignity and emotional health. It is about creating space for your own life, setting priorities, and understanding that loving someone does not need to mean losing yourself, enduring constant pain, or carrying responsibilities that are not yours. Emotional liberation also involves acknowledging repressed feelings. Many people who try to save someone feel anger, frustration, and sadness but suppress these emotions to maintain harmony or avoid blaming the other. This prolonged suppression creates internal strain and makes it difficult to make clear decisions. Allowing yourself to fully feel these emotions, reflect on them, and find healthy ways to express them is essential to breaking the cycle of suffering. Therapy, support groups, or self-reflection practices can be powerful tools in this process, helping to reorganize thoughts, emotions, and priorities in a healthy way. Another important step in liberation is accepting that ending certain patterns or relationships does not mean failure or a lack of love. On the contrary, recognizing that certain bonds are harmful and taking measures to protect yourself is an act of courage and self-love. Establishing clear boundaries, stepping away from repetitive situations of suffering, and investing in reciprocal relationships strengthens self-esteem and creates conditions for more balanced and conscious love. Emotional liberation is therefore a process of reclaiming identity, autonomy, and emotional well-being, allowing the person to regain control over their life and choices. Finally, breaking toxic patterns and seeking emotional liberation is a way to prepare the ground for healthy and sustainable relationships. When a person learns to respect their limits, care for themselves, and understand that they are not responsible for others' choices, they become capable of loving in a balanced, conscious, and reciprocal way. The invisible cycle of pain loses strength, opening space for connections based on respect, true empathy, and emotional reciprocity, where love is not synonymous with suffering but with mutual growth and shared well-being. After realizing the dynamics of trying to save someone who hurts you, deep wounds of trust naturally arise, both in others and in yourself. One may feel fear of opening up, hesitation to invest emotionally again, or distrust of others' intentions. Rebuilding trust is, therefore, an essential step, but it requires time, patience, and self-compassion. It is important to understand that lost trust is not a reflection of weakness or incapacity, but the result of toxic patterns that were not your responsibility. Accepting this is crucial to freeing yourself from feelings of guilt and beginning the process of emotional healing. The first step in rebuilding trust is looking inward and reconnecting with your own needs and values. When someone has spent a long time putting the other person first, it is necessary to relearn how to prioritize oneself, recognize personal limits, and strengthen self-esteem. This internal reconstruction serves as a solid foundation for future relationships. Those who know and respect themselves are better prepared to identify signs of respect, reciprocity, and balance, avoiding the repetition of cycles of suffering. Rebuilding trust, therefore, begins with reclaiming one's own emotional security. Another crucial point is the ability to establish clear and healthy boundaries. Healthy relationships depend on reciprocity and mutual respect. Without these, any bond risks becoming harmful. Learning to communicate feelings, needs, and boundaries assertively is a powerful tool for protecting oneself and maintaining balanced relationships. It is natural to initially fear that setting limits may be interpreted as rejection or coldness, but with practice and awareness, this stance strengthens self-esteem and fosters more genuine connections, where both parties feel respected and safe. Rebuilding trust also involves gradually opening up to new relationships or strengthening existing bonds, but with discernment. It is important to observe behaviors, consistent actions, and signs of mutual respect rather than relying solely on words or promises. Patience is essential. Trust is not restored overnight, and healthy relationships are built through consistency, open communication, and balanced empathy. This process not only protects a person from harmful relationships but also reinforces the ability to love consciously, without getting lost in cycles of pain. Finally, rebuilding trust also means learning to trust yourself. This involves believing in your own ability to make healthy decisions, protect yourself, and establish clear boundaries. When a person trusts themselves, they do not rely on another's validation to feel worthy of love or respect. This self-confidence is the foundation of any balanced and sustainable relationship, allowing the bond to be built on respect, reciprocity, and emotional security. In this way, a person not only protects themselves from the invisible cycle of pain but also creates space for truly healthy relationships, where love is a source of growth and well-being, not continuous suffering. Reaching the point of recognizing that trying to save someone who hurts you is a painful cycle is both liberating and challenging. This awareness marks the beginning of a journey of self-discovery, healing, and emotional strengthening. The process is not linear. There will be moments of doubt, emotional relapses, and conflicting feelings. However, each step taken toward understanding, self-protection, and setting boundaries is a step toward emotional freedom. Accepting that you cannot change the other person but can care for yourself is the foundation for creating healthier and more meaningful relationships. Transforming pain into growth means looking at your past experiences with honesty and compassion. Every relationship that caused suffering offers valuable lessons about boundaries, self-esteem, empathy, and self-love. Instead of blaming yourself or feeling ashamed, it is possible to see these experiences as opportunities for learning and strengthening. It is in this reflective space that emotional resilience is built, the ability to recognize harmful patterns, protect oneself, and make decisions that prioritize personal well-being. Growing from pain does not mean forgetting the past, but learning from it and using it as a foundation to build a more balanced future. Another essential aspect is hope. Breaking free from the cycle of trying to save someone who hurts you creates space to believe that healthy relationships are possible and that it is legitimate to desire reciprocal love and mutual respect. Hope is not naivety. It is a conscious choice to seek connections that promote well-being and mutual growth without self-sacrifice or losing oneself in the process. Every act of self-care, every boundary set, and every reflection on your own needs strengthens this hope, showing that it is possible to live in more balanced, happy, and conscious relationships. Finally, transforming pain into growth and hope is closely linked to self-love. Learning to value yourself, respect your boundaries, and care for your emotional health is not selfishness, it is an act of courage and preservation. By practicing self-love, you create conditions to love in a healthy, conscious, and reciprocal way. The invisible pain of trying to save someone who hurts you stops being a constant burden and becomes an opportunity for learning, resilience, and self-discovery. It is along this path that life begins to balance, allowing future relationships to be based on respect, true empathy, and emotional reciprocity rather than ongoing suffering. Ultimately, the journey of someone who chooses to free themselves from this cycle is a journey of empowerment. Each step toward emotional protection, self-care, and awareness of boundaries strengthens the ability to live fully, balanced, and authentically. Pain, although inevitable at times, transforms into fuel for building an emotionally healthy life, genuine relationships, and strengthened self-esteem. By understanding that caring for yourself is the first act of true love, you discover that it is possible to love without losing yourself, and that hope and growth can emerge from the most painful experiences.